Great. So, welcome, Justine. I'm going to hand over to you now, as you are the guest of honor tonight. Thank you so much
Oh,
for joining us.
thank you so much for inviting me. Honestly, I've really been looking forward to this. And we have had a couple of ex-racehorses in our family, not for some time, I have to say, but my mum used to breed thoroughbreds. So this is a topic really close to my heart. Um, so before we start, I'm just thinking, do we need to talk about Agria?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to bring these webinars to everybody for free. And it's down to the very generous support that Agria are providing ROR with. So we'd really appreciate it if you could run a quote using the QR code on the screen at the moment. Agria genuinely really know about ex-racehorses. They are ex-racehorse owners themselves, so they really do. They're so good at championing our cause, and they're really behind the work that we do. You don't necessarily need to run a quote for your horse. You can run it for your dog, cat, or rabbit if you have one. So yeah, it would be hugely appreciated if as many people as possible could run a quote just by the QR code, and you never know if the price is right, then you might take out a policy as well. But yeah, just a big thank you to Agria for their continued support with these webinars in particular.
Yeah, brilliant. They're very good at trying to promote good welfare, I have to
Mm.
say. Fantastic. Okay, well, I will get started. Is that okay with you, Ali?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, so welcome to Understanding Ex-Racehorse Behaviour. Um, and a huge thank you to Retraining of Racehorses for inviting me to speak today. So in this webinar, I want to take a look at why ex-racehorses might display certain behaviours um, during retraining or in everyday routines, in their general management, and we can take a look at how understanding their previous experiences can help us support them more effectively. A little bit about me to start with. I'm the founder of Understand Horses, which is an online education platform. I'll talk to you a bit about that at the end of the webinar. I've been working as an equine behaviour and welfare consultant since 2007. I'm a certified equine behaviour consultant with the International Association of Animal Behaviour Consultants, that's IAABC, and I'm also accredited as an animal behaviourist with the Animal Behaviour and Training Council, that's ABTC. I'm a visiting lecturer at a number of universities and colleges across the UK, and I often work as an expert witness in legal cases involving equine behaviour and welfare. Alongside working with horse owners to resolve their horses' behaviour problems, I also provide mentoring and supervision to equine behaviour students and professionals. And I deliver lectures and workshops and webinars internationally, as well as writing for publications and websites. So before we begin, a quick look at what I want to cover today. I want to start by looking at the life of a racehorse and their transition into a new home. I want to explore stress, how that affects the horse, and some of the most common behavioural challenges that owners will encounter. I'm then going to finish by discussing practical ways that we can help horses adjust and thrive in their new lives. So we need to understand the life that many racehorses will have experienced. Most are weaned relatively young. Colts are often weaned at around 6 months, but some fillies may remain with their dams for longer. And across the board, weaning methods will vary. But from an early age, their lives become extremely structured and very human directed. They live in very busy environments with consistent routines, which I'm going to come back to a lot, regular handling, and pretty much all the time they will have other horses around them. And this early experience is going to shape how they learn about the world in general and influence how they respond when they move into a completely different environment later in life. So one of the defining features of racing yards is routine. They are fed, exercised, handled, and managed at really predictable times every day. Turnout will vary considerably between yards. Some horses will be turned out very regularly, and that might be in individual turnout, it might be sometimes in groups. Others may have very limited turnout or no turnout during the racing season, and then they may spend a holiday period living out together in groups when they're not racing. Forage management also varies. Some horses will receive forage a few times a day, while others will have access to forage for longer periods. But respiratory health and performance are a major priority, so forage quality is often exceptional. And haylage is sourced specifically for quality and consistency, and horses are commonly fed from the floor or from hay bars rather than hay nets. Many horses will be accustomed to grain-based feeds and may never have had some of the feeds that leisure riders might give them in their second life. I want to say something like chaff. So these systems create a very specific adaptive environment. Routine provides predictability for the horse and security. And we need to remember that many racehorses, or many ex-racehorses rather, will have spent years or indeed most of their lifetime living within that structure. Racehorses are trained to be athletes. Much of their work focuses on fitness, forward movement, and efficiency. They're commonly exercised in strings, so that kind of follow my leader, following one another in a predictable pattern, and very few would be ridden completely alone. The riding style, of course, is also very different from that found in most leisure homes or indeed in competitions of other disciplines, as it were. Jockeys and yard riders are going to ride with much shorter stirrups, and they'll have a forward seat. They'll carry their weight differently from most leisure riders or indeed competition riders. And many racehorses are ridden with minimal or no consistent rein contact and are not routinely asked for collection in the same way that a riding horse might be. Jockeys generally don't use the reins in the same way that a leisure rider would. For example, shortening the reins might predict acceleration rather than slowing down or collecting. And most of the time, jockeys are going to mount the horse in walk. Although many modern yards now include racing yards, I should mention, although many modern racing yards now include arena work or pole work and schooling exercises, racehorses are regularly worked on gallops and hacked out as a group. They are generally rewarded for responding promptly and moving forward, so they become extremely sensitive and responsive. And when these horses move into a riding home, they're suddenly expected to interpret a very different set of rider cues, carry a rider in a different position, and often work with a more consistent rein contact. So this can help explain why some ex-race horses can appear very sensitive or reactive, or very keen to go forward, and that they might be confused by contact or reluctant to stand still when they begin their second career. Most racehorses become very accustomed to travelling and attending busy racecourses. However, race day follows a really predictable routine again. The horses are on arrival, are unloaded immediately. They may be taken to stables, they'll be prepared by their grooms, and then they'll be moved through the pre-parade and parade areas before racing. Throughout the day, they are almost constantly walking unless they're going to be in their stable. So we need to consider that they're rarely expected to stand still, to stand tied up, or, for example, to wait quietly on a lorry. They're also used to very specific movement patterns, with horses generally traveling in the same direction and maintaining predictable spacing. Repeated exposure to these very stimulating environments means that a relatively high level of sympathetic nervous system arousal can become normal for some horses. So, in other words, they become accustomed to functioning in busy, exciting environments while remaining able to perform. By comparison, competitions for sport horses or riding clubs can be far more confusing. They may need to stand on a lorry or trailer for long periods of time, or just hang around waiting for their class or in between classes. They're going to need to be tied up. They're going to encounter horses moving in all directions and very close to them, and they're going to need to stand still while their rider mounts. Warm up arenas, I know, can be very, very challenging for some ex-race horses because they have just never experienced horses coming, first of all, in such close proximity, but coming at them in different directions without it being more regimented, I want to say. So many of the behavioral issues owners are going to see at competitions are going to start, I'm sure you can understand, to make much more sense when we view it through this lens. The social experiences in racing are often very different from those of leisure horses again. While turnout practices vary considerably between yards, most racehorses will spend much of their daily lives in the company of other horses. They'll be able to see them, they'll be hacked out with them, and they are exercised in company. They're going to travel in company, and they will often work in close proximity to others. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be comfortable being turned out either individually or with unfamiliar horses or living in larger social groups immediately. Some horses may have experienced individual turnout throughout much of their career. Some may never have been turned out with another horse at all. It's also important to remember that being close to other horses may have become strongly associated with exercise, training, or racing. So as a result, some ex-race horses can find new social situations challenging. Many owners will expect their horse to settle immediately into a new group environment, but socialization is a skill that develops with experience. And some horses may adapt very quickly, but others may need time and careful management to learn how to interact successfully with unfamiliar horses. And we can look at that a bit more later on. So before we look at specific behavior problems, I want us to understand that retirement from racing often is going to involve major changes to almost every aspect of a racehorse's life. Many behaviours that concern owners can be better understood when viewed in the context of this transition. So when a horse leaves racing, virtually every aspect of their life is different. They're going to encounter different feed and different feeding systems, different forage, different turnout arrangements, different handling styles, different riders, different equipment, and entirely different expectations of them. Many will move from very busy racing yards to very quiet environments where the pace of life can feel different for them too. Some horses are suddenly expected to spend time alone, to hack out alone, to stand tied up, to stand still for mounting, or to wait quietly for long periods at competitions, and they're going to find that really hard. They may also be introduced to new training methods and riding styles that use instructions and cues that they've never encountered before. We also need to consider that at the same time, they're going to be adapting to new people, new horses, new routines, and new social groups. So this is not simply a change of owner. This is a major physical and psychological transition for them. And I think understanding the scale of that change will help explain why these horses need time, patience, and support to adapt successfully. This life change is undoubtedly going to be stressful. There is no two ways about it. So I want us to take a look at what stress is and how it can affect the horse. And this will give us a better understanding of what's going on. So stress has been defined as the body's response to any demand placed upon it. So in simple terms, it's the horse's biological response to a challenge, a change, or a threat. And very importantly, that threat may be real or it could actually be something that is just perceived by the horse. Stress itself is not always a bad thing. Some stress is really beneficial. Um, and we would sometimes refer to the beneficial stress as eustress. So, this is the type of stress associated with learning, with adaptation, with play, with problem solving, or successfully coping with challenges that you feel good after you've done something. And without some level of stress, animals wouldn't learn, they wouldn't develop resilience, they wouldn't adapt to their environment or engage fully with the world around them. So, our goal isn't to eliminate stress completely, that wouldn't be possible, but to understand it and to recognize when it becomes too much, too frequent, or it doesn't resolve. So, we'll start to see problems when the demands placed on the horse exceed their ability to cope, or when stress becomes prolonged, overwhelming, or inescapable. Excuse me. So, this is often referred to as distress. And it's this form of stress that I'm really going to be talking about. And that has the potential to negatively affect welfare, health, and behavior. Stressors can be external or internal. So, external stressors would be things like transport, difficult social situations, unfamiliar environments, changes in routine, or weather conditions potentially, or training challenges. Internal stressors are going to originate within the horse and might include pain or illness or hunger or thirst or fatigue, forms of physical discomfort, really. So when a horse perceives something to be a challenge or a threat, the body activates an automatic survival response. This is what we would often call the fight, flight, or freeze response. And of course, us humans behave in exactly the same way. We're going to have exactly the same system as the horse would. So hormones such as adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol are released into the bloodstream, and these cause heart rate to increase, breathing becomes faster, blood pressure rises, and blood flow is redirected away from processes like digestion and towards the muscles so that the animal is ready to take flight. The horse will become more alert, more vigilant, and more prepared to respond. So, in the short term, if we've got a short term stressor or an acute stressor, these physiological changes are adaptive. They're going to help the horse cope with challenges and they're going to help the horse stay safe. If the challenge passes and the horse can recover, the stress response switches off and the body will return back to normal. So that would be what we would call acute or short-term stress. But we see difficulties arising when stressors are repeated, they're unpredictable, they're unavoidable, or when the horse has got little or no opportunity to recover in between. So in those situations, the stress response remains activated for prolonged periods. So this is what we would refer to as chronic stress, and over time it can contribute to a range of physical and behavioral problems. So as I move through the rest of this webinar, I want us to remember that many ex-racehorses are experiencing multiple changes at the same time and multiple stresses at the same time. So understanding how this stress is going to affect their behavior is going to be a key to understanding why some horses are going to struggle to adapt to life after racing. Stress becomes problematic when activation of the stress response becomes chronic rather than temporary. When recovery is limited, the horse might remain in a heightened state of physiological and emotional arousal. So here we're going to get those very sensitive, very quick to react horses. And over time, this is going to contribute to both physical and behavioral problems. So stress has got a profound effect on welfare, health, behavior, and performance, yet we often don't recognize it. Horses don't necessarily hide stress, but they often express it in ways that are misunderstood. So subtle changes in behavior or posture or facial expression and interaction with us and other horses are frequently the first indicators that a horse may be struggling to cope. These early signs are easy to miss, or they might be labeled as the horse being sharp or stubborn or naughty, or that they've got attitude. And unfortunately, when stress goes unrecognized, horses may be subjected to increased pressure, inappropriate training methods, or punishment, which of course is going to further increase stress and escalate the problem. Stress also has important implications for both welfare and safety because it can alter behavior in different ways. Horses vary in their coping styles. They're all individuals. So with some, stress may not always look so dramatic. Some horses will be very reactive, they'll be vigilant, they'll want to avoid, they'll be very avoidant, and they may be very unpredictable, making them more likely to respond quickly to perceived threats. Others might show more passive responses, so they might become quieter or withdrawn or less responsive, or appearing to almost shut down. And in some cases, stress affects physical behaviors like eating, resulting in a reduced appetite. So recognizing these different responses is really important because a horse that might appear to be calm or compliant may still be experiencing significant stress. Also, I'm sure that you'll be aware that chronic stress is associated with issues like gastric ulcers, with weight loss, and suppression of the immune system, which can affect overall health and recovery. It also impacts learning, so it can really affect training. So, recognizing stress early allows us to make changes to management, training, handling, or environment before problems become more serious. And once we understand what the horse is experiencing, we're in a much better position to help them cope successfully. I'll just briefly mention that common stresses for the horse can come from many sources. There are I could spend some time here listing them for you, but major stresses would be pain, social disruption, being confined for long periods of time, inappropriate feeding practices, travel, unfamiliar environments, and training or handling challenges. And interesting thinking about that because one of the reasons chronic stress is so often missed is that we tend to focus on individual stressors. And in reality, we need to consider that horses are often experiencing multiple stresses at the same time. And it's the accumulation of those stresses that can push them beyond their ability to cope. Now, I don't know how many of you will have heard of trigger stacking. This is quite regularly talked about in the dog training community, but we don't talk about it so much with horses. So this is the process where multiple small stressors, as I've just mentioned, might add up to produce a much larger reaction. So if I go out and see a client, this is where my clients might say that a behavior has just come out of the blue when actually the horse has been accumulating stress over time. And it indicates that horses might behave very differently on different days, depending on what's happened earlier. If several stressors occur close together or without giving the horse enough time to recover, the horse can go over what we would call their emotional threshold. And that's when we might start to see bigger, more reactive and sometimes dangerous behaviors. So if we look at this diagram, this black line at the bottom represents the horse's emotional baseline. So this is where they would be calm and relaxed. And higher up here, we've got that red line, which is their emotional threshold. And this is an example and me trying to give you a good idea of how you can envisage this. So that emotional threshold, let's say that that's going to be the point where behavior might become much more reactive. Now I want you to think about individual stressors. So here on the left, we've got a dog who might be barking or chasing a horse, and that might raise an individual horse's arousal slightly. Let's say it takes it to 25% of its 100% level. If you're out on a hack and a cyclist passes very quickly and your horse is a little bit worried about cyclists, that might raise it to 40% of their emotional threshold. If you're out on a hack with another horse and that other horse becomes anxious or reactive, that might increase it to 60% of their emotional threshold. Now, if you're over a period of, let's say, a morning, if your horse encounters all three of those stresses, the dog, the bike, the anxious horse, and they have 20 minutes, half an hour in between to be able to relax in between and go back to their emotional baseline, that's fine. They're going to be able to cope with that. It's individually, these might not cause a major problem. But if they happen immediately one after another, or if they happen at the same time, those effects stack and the horse can very quickly cross that emotional threshold. So that's when we might see much bigger behaviors like biting or spinning or running backwards or bucking, becoming aggressive or spooking even. I really think it's useful for us to think about this in human terms. So imagine if you've had a really bad night's sleep and you get up and you're late, so you miss your breakfast, you get stuck in traffic, you've had a really stressful morning and you get to work and you are much less able to cope with something else going wrong later in the day. And you might overreact, or you might be very grumpy, or you might start to get really stroppy with your workmates. This same accumulation of stresses is going to apply to our horses too. But we also need to consider that not all horses are going to be starting from the same baseline. If a horse is chronically stressed, if they're not getting good sleep, if they're in pain, if they have social isolation, or if they're conflicted or struggling with herd mates, let's say, they've got restricted access to forage or limited opportunities for movement, they may already be functioning at a higher level of physiological and emotional arousal. So think about that. They might be starting at that dotted red line there. So in effect, they're living their day-to-day lives much closer to that emotional threshold, and they're less tolerant of what's going to be going on around them. So understanding trigger stacking really encourages us to ask, what has this horse experienced leading up to a problem behavior, let's say? And this question is very useful if we're thinking about trying to understand behavior and support the horse effectively. So I'm sure you're starting to get a picture of why ex-racehorses are different than normal leisure horses. We know that the life of a racehorse is very different than that of a leisure or sport horse in other disciplines. And it's important for us to recognize that ex-racehorses are actually athletes that have lived and worked in a very, very specific environment, routine, and training system. And for many ex-racehorses, racing isn't just something that they did as a job, it's the only lifestyle they've ever known. Their daily routines, their feeding, their handling, their exercise, their social experiences and expectations have been remarkably consistent throughout their lives. So then they move into a new home. Many of the behaviors that ex-racehorse owners are going to see are not necessarily signs of a horse being naughty or difficult. They are functional responses to unfamiliar situations, to new expectations, or challenges in adapting to a completely different lifestyle. So if we can understand their behavior in the context of their previous experiences and learning, it becomes much easier to support them successfully. Before we look at some common behavior problems, I think it's really important to remember this is really not an exhaustive list. Unfortunately, I don't have much time this evening, and I did say to Ali earlier, I've been struggling to get this webinar down to less than 3 hours. So I'm not saying lots of ex-racehorses have problems, but there is so much that we could talk about. Many, many horses transition successfully, while others may show a range of behavioural and management challenges during this major life change. I also want to note that adaptation isn't limited to ridden or handling behaviours. Some horses, as an example, might initially be reluctant to eat unfamiliar feeds or forage. They've spent all their life eating very specific types of feed, can be very difficult to swap over. We would be exactly the same. Racing yards often provide very, very high quality forage, and feeding practices, as I mentioned previously, will differ considerably from leisure horses and possibly sport horse yards as well. Um, some horses may have little experience of products like chaff. Forage will have been presented differently, and changes in diet, as we know, take time to adjust to both physically, but we also need to consider mentally too. Um, so, with all the behaviours I'm going to discuss, it's important to consider the horse's previous experiences, their current management, welfare, and health before assuming that everything is a training problem. So the ridden experience of a racehorse is very different from that of a typical leisure or sport horse. As I mentioned, racehorses are trained to be athletes. Their work focuses on fitness, responsiveness, and forward movement rather than the types of schooling exercises that we would commonly see in dressage, riding club activities, or show jumping. They're typically ridden in extremely light saddles by lightweight riders using a very forward seat and a relatively light rein contact. And as I mentioned, shortening the reins might signal that the horse is about to move forward, whereas leisure riders are going to shorten the reins in preparation to slow down, to turn, or to begin schooling exercises. So we are going to need to teach these horses new cues, and this is going to take time and patience. Most racehorses are exercised in company and may have limited experience of hacking alone or working alone in an arena. While modern training yards increasingly use schooling and pole work, sustained arena work, collection, and slower, more balanced canter work may still be very, very unfamiliar to these horses. It's also worth considering the physical demands placed on the horse during retraining. A different rider position, possibly increased rider weight, changes in saddle design can all affect their comfort and might contribute to ridden behavior problems, particularly if pain or discomfort is present. So understanding those differences helps us recognize that behaviors like rushing forward, tension, sensitivity to rein contact, or reluctance to work in a particular way might be part of the horse's adaptation to this very different career. Many ex-race horses may be described as spooky or sharp or reactive or difficult to settle or relax. And if we're going to consider their previous experiences, then that's realistically entirely understandable. In racing, rapid reactions, heightened awareness of the environment, and sensitivity to cues is beneficial. And remember, repeated exposure to highly stimulating environments might mean that a relatively high level of sympathetic nervous system activation has become normal for some horses. So these are not flaws. These are characteristics that may have contributed to their success in their previous role. So when the horse leaves racing, they're often faced with these changes, a huge number of changes at once. And the expectations placed upon them are all going to change within a very short period. What we interpret as spookiness or overreactivity might be reflecting a horse who's actually very stressed and struggling with this new regime and training system. We also mustn't overlook the role of physical discomfort. Pain can reduce a horse's ability to cope with stress. It increases vigilance, and it will make startle responses more likely. A horse who seems unusually reactive or tense may be experiencing discomfort that's affecting both their behavior and their emotional state. So, vet assessment should always be one of the first considerations. It can be useful to ask questions like, does this horse feel safe in this environment? Are they coping with the demands being placed upon them? Have they had enough time to adjust? Could pain or stress or confusion or frustration be contributing to what we're seeing? And do they actually understand what we're asking them to do? If they're reactive and we use a stronger bit, or we pull on the reins, or we yank them if we're leading them, trying to punish that behavior or suppress that behavior, it's often going to make matters worse. As you can understand, we're going to be increasing their stress levels. So the goal should not be simply to suppress the behavior, but to try and understand what's driving it and help the horse develop the skills, the confidence, and the coping strategies to thrive in this new environment. Napping or reluctance to go forward can have many causes, but in ex-racehorses, it's often linked to confidence, social attachment, or just confusion or fear in a completely new environment. We always need to be considering pain and discomfort first. Um, these can significantly reduce a horse's ability to cope and increase resistance to moving forward. We know that most racehorses will have spent their ridden lives exercising in company, working as part of a string, doing road work, and rarely being asked to make decisions independently. So being ridden out alone or being ridden in the arena alone even, or doing any task by themselves may be an entirely new experience, and it might be quite frightening for them. Some horses are going to be understandably anxious about leaving other horses because they never have done that before, while others may simply be unsure about what's being asked of them. And we could really be seeing a lack of confidence in an awful lot of horses. It's very easy to overface horses by asking them to do more than they've done previously, or indeed something that they've never done before. But rather than trying to push through this, I would say instead focus on building confidence gradually. Long lining here can be really, really useful. I know Ali will be able to talk to you about that at length, as can starting with another horse ahead, kind of doing leapfrog, asking the horse ahead to stop and maybe asking your horse to overtake them. So just going a few steps ahead at a time. As with everything that I'm going to say here, changes need to be really gradual. We need to be asking for small steps. Having someone walk alongside you or leading the horse for part of the route is not a bad idea. And taking a lead rope on early rides can be really helpful. From my point of view, getting off to support an anxious horse is not giving in, it is helping them succeed. I would rather that an anxious horse has a good experience and comes back home on a good note than we try and push them. The problem is escalated, they become fearful, and the problem is worse next time. So break everything down into small, manageable steps. Repeated short rides, or even I like to call them micro hacks, away from the yard should be seen as your goal before you ever consider a long hack. And with some horses who are really worried about going out or going forward or leaving home or other horses, even a few meters should be seen as a win. I would just say end on a good note. We want to be having repeated positive experiences. So confidence develops through successful experience, not by overwhelming or pushing them and just hoping that they're going to cope. And I think really we need to consider that they may be telling us that they're not yet confident enough to take the next step. Some ex-racehorse owners will describe them as bargy, pushy, or difficult to handle. But I think we need to remember that these horses have learned a totally different set of rules. In racing yards, they've lived their lives in those predictable, highly structured routines and busy environments, handled by multiple people, moving frequently between locations and expected to navigate bustling yards full of activity. And so the behaviors that saw them through those experiences that worked well in those environments may not be the behaviors that would be expected in a private home. So what appears rude or pushy may simply reflect previous learning, combined with anxiety or essentially confusion about what's now being asked of them. We might have totally different handling styles. Behavior must always be interpreted in context rather than being viewed as deliberate misbehavior. So this is where it's going to be very helpful to go back to basics. If we want different responses, we're going to have to clearly teach them rather than assume that they already know what's expected of them. I'm going to talk in a little while about learning theory, and that will help us understand how horses learn and why some training approaches are more effective than others. But I would say instead of focusing on stopping unwanted behavior, your goal should be to teach and reinforce the behavior that you want. So consistency, clear cues, good timing, and reinforcement of desired behaviors are all really important. Many handling problems, not just with ex-race horses, but horses in general, are not really behavior problems at all. They're communication issues that arise when a horse is trying to navigate their world and we're not understanding what they're trying to say. So, not wanting to stand still or potentially to tie up is one of the most common concerns reported by ex-racehorse owners. So, the first thing to consider is whether the horse has actually ever been taught the behavior being requested. Many racehorses are rarely expected to stand still for extended periods. Jockeys will mount while the horse is walking, and horses are generally kept moving on race days, and many routine procedures can be carried out with the horse being held by a groom rather than being tied up. So if you're asking your ex-racehorse to stand quietly while you're mounting them or grooming them or waiting for the farrier or waiting for a judge at a show, you might simply be asking for a behavior that the horse has never learned. Anxiety and uncertainty in difficult situations will also increase that. If we think about the fight or a flight response, we've got all those hormones telling the horse to move, and so it can increase fidgeting. A horse who's worried about their surroundings might find it difficult to remain stationary, particularly in unfamiliar environments. And we really do need to remember that horses do not naturally spend long periods standing completely still when awake. In natural or free living conditions, they are usually grazing, moving, interacting with other horses, or exploring their environment. There's some research that has shown that in a wild or a free living environment, a horse would naturally move one of their feet every 3 to 5 seconds. So they don't really stand still unless they're dozing. So standing motionless is largely something we ask horses to do for our convenience. So standing quietly, tying up, and waiting patiently are learned skills that need to be taught gradually. I just wanted to say one of my clients did a wonderful thing with her horse who struggled to be tied up. And that was she used the equivalent of a lick mat that they use for dogs. I don't know if any of you are familiar with dog training, but in many difficult situations, dog owners will provide a mat that's smeared with dog food or something that the dog likes that they will stand and lick that. Perhaps in vet conditions or when they're being washed or husbandry conditions. And so I'd had a chat with my client about doing this. And so she just got a normal human chopping board. I say human chopping board, that sounds like I'm a serial killer. But you know what I mean, a human grade chopping board. And she actually smeared it with a whole range of different things, tied it up to his hay net when he was tied up. I would absolutely say I would never expect a horse to be tied up without a hay net or something to do. I think that's pretty unfair on them. So she used peanut butter. Horses do eat nuts, but I wouldn't give them too much. And she tried Marmite, which he loved. And you can smear the herb pastes that you can get in supermarkets now. If you're not worried about sugar, think about honey or jam. Just watch out for sweeteners. And baby foods are great. So carrot puree, applesauce, that kind of thing. So you can use that, create your own lick mat, tie it up, and if you're going to teach your horse to stand still, give it to them for very, very short periods of time. Give them the lick mat, but only expect them to stand still for very short periods of time and just increase it gradually in subsequent sessions. Um, Difficulties with saddling or bridling should always prompt us to think about pain or discomfort first. Conditions like gastric ulcers, musculoskeletal pain, poor saddle fit, dental problems if we're thinking about bridling, or girth sensitivity can all contribute to negative reactions during tacking up. Horses learn through experience. So if saddling has been associated with discomfort in the past, then potentially simply seeing the saddle or feeling the girth tighten might trigger an anticipatory response, like trying to nip or bite the owner. But for ex-racehorses, there might be an additional factor here. So racing saddles are extremely lightweight. Riders may well be lighter, and the rider's position is going to be very different from that used in most riding disciplines. So a full treed saddle, a heavier rider, and longer periods under saddle might all require an adjustment period. Their behavior during tacking up is valuable information. So we should be investigating what the horse is trying to tell us. Some ex-racehorse owners are often surprised when their horse becomes reactive at competitions, especially if they've travelled and raced regularly. But as we've discovered, race day routines are very different from most leisure or sport competitions. And so asking them to stand on the lorry, to wait for long periods of time, to tie up and to work around unfamiliar horses in all directions on the showground, or in a warm-up arena is potentially asking them to cope with an environment but that they may never have experienced before. And let's also consider trigger stacking. Loading, traveling, waiting, competing, and traveling home. We've got so many stresses that are going to add up during the day. So what might look like overreaction may simply be a horse struggling to cope with multiple stresses at once. I should add, a really, really useful thing is to keep a diary and to consider all of these individual stresses. If your horse is a little bit worried about something, make note of it, and you can get help from a behaviorist to address those issues, to make them more resilient so that we can avoid all these trigger stacking. So if they start to box walk when you bring travel boots or when you pull the lorry out, those things can be addressed by counter conditioning and systematic desensitization. So these issues are resolvable. Many ex-race horses adapt extremely well to turnout and group living, but for some horses, these changes can be challenging. As we've mentioned, their previous experience of turnout is going to have been very varied. Some may never have been turned out, some may have been turned out individually, some may have had short periods of turnout, but they may well not have had much opportunity to develop social skills within a stable group for any period of time. But kind of conversely, at the same time, racehorses are going to spend much of their lives surrounded by other horses. So they train together, travel together, and rarely spend time alone, truly alone. So as a result, these horses can become very strongly attached to companions and may find separation difficult, understandably. So we might see this as running along the fence line, or constantly standing at the gate if a friend comes in or if they're left out, or calling or pacing or box walking if their friend is taken away. Reluctance to leave other horses, as I mentioned before with napping, reluctance to leave the yard area, that can be a separation anxiety problem, or conflict within a new social group. So these behaviours are also often adaptation challenges. Our aim should be for horses to become comfortable with turnout and social contact, and these horses need to develop the ability to cope independently when required, but this process may well need to be gradual. Introduce horses over a fence first. You can use scent swapping, where you swap the horses' droppings over so that they're introduced to each other. Scent is a huge, huge factor in relation to meeting other horses. Um, the horse's sense of smell is very different to ours. Um, Provide good access to forage and carefully manage early turnout experiences, and you can potentially help horses adjust successfully. A quick word about catching. Reluctance to be caught may happen because the horse is enjoying turnout for the first time. It might be because they're anxious about being separated from other horses, or that they've learned that being caught predicts something that they don't want to do. So we have to get to the bottom of why that's happening, and manage the catching process very carefully. Aggressive behavior is often one of the most concerning behaviors for owners, but aggression is a behavioral strategy. It is not a personality trait. I meet a lot of clients who will just say, my horse is just like that. They won't be. This will be a response to something. Aggression serves a purpose from the horse's perspective. The behavior might be intended to increase distance from something that they perceive as threatening, perhaps to protect access to a valued resource like food or even water troughs. I've seen that before, to avoid discomfort or to resolve a situation that the horse might find difficult. So, common underlying contributors again will be pain and discomfort. Fear is huge. Fear related aggression is a very big problem with a lot of horses, not just ex-race horses. Frustration, conflict, and chronic stress are all going to contribute to this as well. And of course, aggression can also be learned as a response to a previous situation. So we need to understand the function of the behavior. That's the first step towards identifying and addressing the underlying cause. I would absolutely say, if at all possible, do not punish the behavior because it can really, really risk the behavior escalating. And I would say with aggressive behaviors, contact a decent, qualified behaviorist to help resolve these behaviors. Stereotypic behaviors like crib biting or weaving and box walking are often seen as repetitive behaviors that may appear to not have any particular function or obvious function, but they are generally considered coping mechanisms. And these are going to help horses manage the challenges within their environment. They're often associated with previous or current management and welfare issues, particularly in environments that restrict normal horse behavior. We've never seen them in wild or free living horses. So these are human created behaviors. Factors like confinement, limited forage, reduced social contact, and barren environments are risk factors. It's a common myth that horses learn these behaviors by copying other horses. There's no evidence of that. Instead, stereotypies will develop because of the horse's own experiences and circumstances. And actually, in many cases, when people think that a horse has started stereotypies because they've seen another horse do it, it may well be the management on the yard, the situation that the horses are in that are causing these behaviors. But there is research has shown that there is potentially a genetic element that would need to be triggered to start these behaviors. So although they're undesirable from a management perspective, they're serving a function for the horse. We really, really should not be punishing these behaviors or physically preventing the horse from performing them. That does not address the underlying cause and usually will increase their stress, potentially make matters worse, or they will start performing a different stereotypic behavior because they're still trying to cope with their stress. Stereotypies are not bad habits. They're coping behaviors that will give us important information about a horse's past or present welfare. And again, if you wanted to address these, I would recommend contacting a behaviorist. So how can we help them adapt? Um, Understanding why behavior occurs is only part of the picture. The next step is considering what we can do to support them as they adapt to this very different way of life. Um, I think one of the most helpful things that we can do is provide predictability across the board. They cope better when their environment, their routine, and their handling are consistent and easy for them to understand. Gradual exposure to new experiences can also help horses build confidence without becoming overwhelmed. We need to meet their basic behavioral and welfare needs. And where possible, we need to give them some degree of choice and control over their environment. This will also really improve their ability to cope. So, even small changes like allowing horses to approach new things at their pace rather than pulling them towards it, or giving them the option to choose whether they actually want to engage with something, can make a significant difference to them. We control everything they do. We have got to start giving some control back to them. Um, Ultimately, the goal is not to eliminate every challenge, but to create an environment that promotes relaxation and helps them develop confidence over time. I've mentioned pain for pretty much everything, and I'm not saying this specifically about ex-racehorses. I would say for my behaviour cases across the board, more than 70% of them, if pain isn't the primary factor, it will be a contributing factor. It's a really, really under-recognized source of stress, can have a significant impact on behaviour, performance, learning and the horse's ability to cope with everyday challenges. And many behavioural problems will actually be the horse's response to discomfort. So we have to ensure that our horses have appropriate vet assessment and that we're not necessarily overlooking subtle or low grade pain. And of course, we need to consider dental health, discomfort and discomfort in the mouth, because that's going to influence eating behaviour, handling, and ridden performance. And of course, check saddle fit, tack, bitting, rider balance, rider position. All of this can contribute to discomfort and stress, particularly in horses adapting to different equipment and riding styles. And I think really important to say, if pain or discomfort is present, training and management changes might help to some extent, but they are not going to fully resolve the problem until the underlying physical cause is addressed. So, one of the most valuable things that you can do when you take on an ex-racehorse is learn as much as possible as their previous life. Speak to trainers, to previous owners, to grooms, or anyone who knows the horse well. Ask about their previous daily routines, their behavior, their handling preferences, their feeding practices, their turnout experience, and how they interacted with other horses. Understanding what the horse is familiar with can help explain behaviors that might have otherwise seemed puzzling. The more information that you've got, the easier it's going to become to understand them and to see the horse as an individual and tailor management and training to their needs. And if I'm talking about retraining, this is Ali's side, really, but we do need to remember that this is not simply about teaching new skills. It's about helping the horse adapt to a new environment and a completely different way of life. We need to build trust and confidence. That should be a priority from the start. Introduce change gradually and set realistic expectations. We want to prevent horses from becoming overwhelmed and allow them to have positive experiences. We also really, really do need to work at the horse's pace rather than following our timeline and pushing them through when they might not be prepared. Some horses will adapt really quickly and others will require more time and support. But throughout the process, pay attention to how the horse responds in different situations. Keep a diary, it's so useful. And how they respond to different environments, even and training pressures. And then that behavior will give you valuable information about how the horse is coping or struggling and whether you should You can speed up the process in some areas, or you have to dial it back in others. Successful retraining is not about pushing horses further or faster. It's about recognizing the individual in front of you and adapting your training to support them and to build confidence. On that note, as horse handlers and riders, I believe all of us should have an understanding of how horses learn. Horses have to learn what we mean, what our cues mean, what behaviors are expected of them, and how to respond in different situations. They are learning all the time, not just during training sessions. Every interaction we have with them is providing information and influencing their future behavior, whether we realize it or not. So if you're doing something different in your training session than when you handle them normally, how are they supposed to understand what they're supposed to do? At its simplest, learning occurs through consequences. Behaviors that lead to desirable outcomes are more likely to be repeated, and behaviors that lead to unpleasant or unrewarding outcomes are less likely to happen in future. So, great diagram here from World Horse Welfare, who very kindly said that we could use this. And this illustrates the four main ways behavior can be influenced. So, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. Now, these terms might sound confusing, but reinforcement simply means a behavior becomes more likely to occur, while punishment means a behavior is less likely to occur. Positive means something is added, and negative means something is removed. Much of traditional horse training relies on negative reinforcement. So that would be applying pressure through a rein or a leg or a lead rope, and then removing that pressure when the horse responds appropriately. A lot of owners and riders don't do that. But applying pressure will activate the stress response, particularly if the horse is already struggling, if excessive pressure is used, or if the pressure is poorly timed. If training is inconsistent, unclear, or too much is asked too quickly, this can lead to confusion and frustration, which is going to increase stress further. However, we know that using positive reinforcement, such as food rewards or wither scratches, or giving access to something that the horse values, will improve learning, increase motivation, and help create positive emotional associations with training. Emotions influence learning too. So horses that are frightened or overwhelmed or highly stressed or in pain are less able to process information and learn effectively. And so this is one reason really why I wanted to cover stress, because it's so important when we're trying to change behavior. Horses give us a lot of information through their behavior and body language, but the early signs can be subtle and easy to miss. So you need to learn what is normal for your own horse. Spend time watching them when they're relaxed, for example, in the field, and notice how their body language changes then when they go into different environments. So facial expressions, the shape of the eye. When they're relaxed, you're going to have a lovely round, soft eye. When they start to become worried about it, the upper eyelid is going to contract, and you're going to see a more triangular shape. And that's often one of the earliest signs of worry. So noticing those small changes, tension in the face, tension in the mouth and the nose and the lips, perhaps changes in posture, or potentially reactions speeding up, or behaviors just like pausing or scanning, looking across the environment, or displacement behaviors. If we can recognize these early signs, we've got an opportunity to respond, to change what we're asking, to reduce pressure, or to give the horse more time before they become overwhelmed or behavior might become dangerous. So the more we understand what our horses are telling us, the better we can respond, and the easier it is to prevent stress rather than react to it. I'm just going to mention these very briefly. For some reason, the text at the bottom of the image on the left is blue, completely blue. So that's from the BHS. There's some really useful frameworks that can help us recognize and interpret signs of stress more clearly. So we've got two examples here. The one on the left is from the BHS. They've got a nice they've got a nice page on recognizing stress. And on the right here, we've got Fear Free. I would absolutely recommend going and having a look at the Fear Free website, which is an American website, but it's for all animals. They do have a small section on horses. This is a really interesting, useful infographic. We also need to meet the horse's basic physical and behavioural needs. So the three F's is a great starting point, and I'm going to say a starting point. It's not everything. Um, horses have evolved as social, grazing, and very mobile animals. So their well-being depends on being able to express those natural behaviours. So they need access to other horses, the ability to forage for much of the day, freedom to move, and the opportunity to rest and recover. So when they're kept alone or unable to have physical contact with others, we often see increased stress levels, difficulty sleeping. Sleep is a huge issue, and a higher risk of both behavioural and health problems. And even when horses are turned out with others, the quality of those interactions matters. So things like frequent changes in groupings or social instability or tension within a group, competition over resources or horses being bullied can also be really stressful for individuals. So we want to be aiming for regular turnout in a varied environment with consistent social groups, with enough space and resources to allow horses to interact and move away from each other comfortably. And being able to explore different areas and interact with their environment is essential for both physical and mental well-being. But if turnout is limited, I know a lot of people struggle on their yards. Think about how else you can provide opportunities for movement. So that might include taking the horse out for walks or riding them or using different areas like arenas as turnout areas, yards as turnout areas, or tracks to allow them to move more freely. Encourage safe social contact, even over fences. Walking horses out together, allowing them to graze in hand alongside another horse can also be beneficial. Set them up to succeed. So many of the behaviours we've discussed today can be reduced or prevented by carefully thinking about how we introduce new experiences. One of the simplest ways is to make things as easy as possible for them. Very often, and I've been guilty of doing this, I've thought, well, he's going to have to deal with that in future, so you might as well start now. Actually, that can really put you back in your training. If we start with situations being as easy as possible for the horse, then we start to include distractions, it will really build their confidence. We also have lots of research showing that calm equine company, wherever possible, is going to reduce stress. Horses are going to learn better, and there's going to be more positive experiences. We want to introduce new experiences gradually. Our goal should be to keep the horse below their emotional stress threshold, where they can learn, they can process information and become confident. So we want to make experiences predictable, manageable, and as low stress as possible. Finally, something that's often overlooked really is the relationship that we have with our horses. Spending time with them without asking something of them is going to make a really big difference. Being around them, grooming, finding their itchy spots they enjoy, being scratched can really help build positive associations and reduce stress. It will also give you a much, much better understanding of your horse as an individual, what they like, what they find difficult, how they respond in different situations. And that links us to something else that's fundamental, being curious. Always question what you see and hear. Don't take things at face value and don't assume that what works for one horse will work for another. The more time you spend observing and interacting with your horse, the better you'll understand them and the easier your relationship will become. If there's one message I'd really like you to take away from today, it's that behaviour always has a cause. Many of the behaviours we see in ex-racehorses make much more sense when we take into account their previous experience, their current environment, and the challenges associated with adapting to a different lifestyle. And please remember that stress doesn't always look dramatic. Some horses become reactive and difficult to manage, and others may be very quiet or withdrawn. Both could be signs that a horse is struggling to cope. Um, Perhaps most importantly, behavior provides valuable information about how a horse is experiencing their world. We need to be more vigilant and we need to be more observant about our horse's behavior and understand that information. That's going to allow us to make better decisions for both horse and for us, for the rider. Um, Patience and predictability are really powerful. If so, If you're if you're interested in learning more about any of the topics that I've covered today, behavior and behavior consulting, body language, stress, training, even resolving trauma, you can find more at understandhorses.com. And this is an educational platform. It's not just me. I work alongside a group of brilliant experts who are all specialists in their fields, and we've created a range of courses and resources that are practical, evidence-based, and designed to be applied in the real world. And we offer courses for professionals as well as shorter on-demand courses that you can access anytime. So if you'd like to continue learning, do come and have a look. We've also got a live event at the end of June where we're going to be looking at things like co-op care and equine trauma, as well as grazing and track systems. So if you're interested, please come along. And I'm now going to hand you to Ali, because this is an incredible resource that Retraining of Racehorses has got, their education library, basically.
So we do this. This is all. These are all in-person days. These the Racing Insight days, Introduction to Training of Former Racehorse Day, realistic retraining demonstrations. These are in-person days that are held all the way across the country. Technically, wherever you live, you should have access to one of these or more across the year. So the Racing Insight days are really interesting because we go and have a look around a racing yard. We see firsthand how racehorses live. Um, I can't express the amount of learning. So I lead some of them. My colleague Amy leads some of them, and my other colleague Debbie leads some of them. Um, I can't express the amount of learning that goes on those yards, particularly with people who haven't owned ex-racehorses before. The understanding that they gain from visiting a racing yard, seeing the horses in their stables, how they're ridden, how they're tacked up, everything. And the racing yards we go to are really generous with their time, and give us a really good behind the scenes look. So even if actually you're a racing fan and you've been to loads of racing yards before, it's always interesting to go and have around look around another one. And I have to say, the majority of yards that we've gone to, people who might have been slightly concerned about racehorses and how they live previously, most of them come out with a really positive view. So, for example, we went to Fergal O'Brien's not so long ago, and all of the horses were turned out at some point while we were there. It was lovely to see really calm, relaxed horses in their stables. And then after we've been to look round the yard, we then go to either a village hall, a little local village hall, or an owner's room on the racing yard. And we have a discussion, a really open discussion about welfare and retraining. A lot of the stuff that Justine's talked about tonight, we do touch on during the Racing Insight days. So I'm really keen to talk about equine learning theory to anyone who'll listen, because I think it's really important that we know how our horses learn. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that we talked about this evening, or Justine has mentioned this evening, we do dive into during the Racing Insight days as well. Introduction to Training of Former Racehorse days. Those are at retrainers yards, and they're held across the country at retrainers yards. And we so far this year, they've been really, really well received. We've actually sold out one of them completely. We've got another one booked for the 1st of August, which is down I think it's near Swindon, but we do have them dotted across the country. They are a really good look at horses that have just come out of retraining through to the ones that have maybe gone further down the retraining line. And you get a behind the scenes look at everything from the management and the care through to maybe how to go about starting the retraining process, the things that you need to consider, the equipment that you might need to use, and they're a really good opportunity to ask any questions that you might have of the retrainers. Really good to network at as well, so that if you do come across an issue, then you have somebody to just call up or send a text to. I.e. the retrainer, for a little bit of help and a little bit of a steer and direction. And then the realistic retraining demonstrations, these are usually held at an evening or at a weekend, just they're a couple of hours. The chance to watch a really good coach coaching horses that are at varying stages of their retraining. So some of them we've had a couple where we've had horses that have they've come pretty much straight out of training, straight to a realistic retraining demonstration, and they've just been long lined. They've just been everything's been done on the floor because that's the stage of training that they're at, through to the more advanced horses. I have to say, all of these three events that are held across the country, they are now subsidised because we've got sponsorship for all of them. Attendance at each of them is just £15 per person. So it's really good value. The Racing Insight Days are sponsored by Altano Vets. The Introduction to Training a Former Racehorse Days are sponsored by Top Spec, and the Realistic Retraining Demonstrations are sponsored by Bliss of London Saddles. So every single one of those, £15 to attend. And the amount of information you get at each of them is phenomenal. If you want to have a look, they are listed on our website. You can go and have a nosy on Horse Monkey as well. And Justine's put the link just there that will tell you a little bit more about each of those days.
Okay. So, any questions?
Yes, lots of questions.
Yeah, I was just having a little bit of a scroll through them. Yeah.
Well done. So you've had a little look. Okay, so I'll start from the top.
Mm.
So we've got one that says, just recently have a new thoroughbred. Could you give me some tips on how to make the new home an easy transition? He has undergone retraining and has been rehomed to a normal riding home before coming to me.
So I'm really thinking about trying to find as much as possible out, as much information as possible about previous home, what his previous routine would have been, and try and keep everything as similar as you can to start with and make changes gradually. Thinking about how can you introduce him to introduce him to other company, make sure that he has got company at all times before you start leaving him in the field on his own or separate him. I think I did notice that that question was at 7 o'clock. So I'm really, really hoping that a lot of the things that I've said might have helped there.
I think so.
Um, have
Yeah.
you got anything else you think we could add, Ali?
No, I think you've answered it beautifully, and you certainly, you've covered so much tonight that I hope that the person who asked has got a good answer to that.
Mm.
Okay, so another Justine has asked, my horse can often get excited walking to the field and will pull through the head collar, jog, shake his head, or flick his front legs. I try to make him stop and wait or do some reversing to help him try to relax, but it doesn't seem to be teaching him the right behavior. Do you have any tips? This is quite common, actually.
Okay, so a couple of things here. The first thing is, and it's really, really common for people to, if a horse is pushing ahead of them, to try and stop them or reverse them. And if you're thinking about if it was you that you were really desperately wanting to go somewhere and somebody is going to stop you and reverse you, that actually it might frustrate you even further. My first recommendation would be practice leading in the arena. and with really, really light contact. Think about learning theory. So you would apply the lightest amount of pressure, ask your horse to walk on at the same time. The minute that they start moving forward, you're going to release that contact and practice getting them to stop in the same way. But you really, really do need to teach leading away from that environment. If you're going to try teaching leading in that environment where they're anxious, you're probably not going to get very far, and both of you are going to get very frustrated. In the meantime, if when you're taking your horse to the field and back, is there any way that you can follow another horse? And you may be able to ask the person in front to stop if your horse is starting to get worried, or that you could walk alongside. More often than not, horses, if you're going to walk with a calm companion, it's going to really improve their behavior. I was going to say, any thoughts from you, Ali?
So I was actually going to ask a question. We've had this with a horse that I previously had on my yard, and it was actually what first introduced me to the concept of positive reinforcement.
Yeah,
And so we did an awful lot of we did a lot of lead, not necessarily in the arena because he was very good in the arena, but we
yeah,
did it. So we've got quite a nice lot of car park and things to be able to work on gravel. And I have to say, I did wear a hat and gloves while I was doing this because he could go bolt upright. In fact, we had a
yeah.
picture of him in this presentation. He was a little chestnut that I was show jumping.
Okay,
He
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
and he was entire. He was a stallion. So when he went bolt upright, he really did go
yeah,
and could get very aroused very quickly, let's
yeah,
just say. So we had to do a lot of handling with him in terms of teaching him to have his attention more on me, even when he was really keen to go somewhere. Bizarrely, he used to do it when he was going onto the horse box. So he'd try and
oh,
gallop up the ramp, and it all got a little bit dangerous. So and sometimes to the field, coming to and from the field. So we used a lot of positive reinforcement to make sure that he was never ahead of me. And then obviously very light pressure release to try and make sure that when he did get slightly ahead of me, we used a little bit of positive negative reinforcement to make sure that come back, and then when he did come back, he got a treat.
yeah,
um, and then gradually, I mean, don't get me wrong, every now and again he had a moment because
yeah.
because but his behavior got far better once he associated that he understood that his attention still had to be on me or whoever was handling him while we were leading him to and from the field.
Absolutely. And well, I was going to say, I'm actually doing this job. I changed my job because I ended up with a 17-2 warm blood that did just this, and he used to rear. And it was at that point that I discovered positive reinforcement training. Now there are so many options if you start going down that route. As Ali's done a brilliant job of describing there. Um, my only concern about mentioning it was that if you've got a horse who is, if you've got an ex-racehorse that is worried about food, that this might be problematic for you. But if you can have a bum bag and you can have, I would start by using a really, really low value food, something like chaff,
Mhm.
if they're happy to use that. But you can put grated apple or carrot in it and keep their attention on you, as Ali is saying. But also you can do brilliant cognitive exercises in the arena where you can teach them to walk to a cone, and they'll be rewarded when you go to a cone. And you can actually then take that exercise um, and transfer it to walking to and from the field, and you can put a series of cones, so they're going to walk from one to the next, so that you're almost doing like a leapfrog situation again. So exploring positive reinforcement training, I would say, is a really, really good idea. Absolutely.
Fab, thank you. Um, So the next one is it says when I first got my horse almost 3 years ago, he didn't like loading. We've done loads of practice with positive reinforcement, amazing, and we are now able to get out. However, I still need to practice in between each outing. I think it might be what the trailer means. For example, taking him out away from his friends rather than the trailer itself now. Is continuing to practice between outings enough, or am I maybe missing something?
Oh, well, the only thing that I was going to say about loading is in so many cases that I see, loading issues will be that there will be a physical problem that is part of the issue. And it's also quite important for us to consider that we can make the trailer really, really positive. We can put feed in an open trailer every night and have them eat on it. But then if they go out, and let's say they might go out in it, but they might be reluctant to come back. It may be that they're struggling physically on the journey. So the first thing I would say is speak to your vet.
Mm.
And even something like a pain relief trial might be a really interesting, might give you a really interesting response. So I would start with that. I do think practice is great. I would say, are they always going out on their own? Can you take company? It's a big ask, isn't it, really, to take them out somewhere by themselves? And we need to think about what's happening at the other end. Is the experience at the other end difficult for them as well? So I'm sorry I'm not giving you more specific advice here, but really there's an awful lot to think about with the loading process. But I would start by asking a vet to have a look and just make sure there's nothing physical going on. And then if you've got the all clear, then think about how we can improve that loading and traveling process. Can we take company? Can we do short journeys and take them somewhere that's very low stress, or just take them somewhere just down the road to a local yard? Take them off, give them a feed, put them back on, bring them back, see how that works. So really good luck.
Yeah. I think you've answered that very specifically.
Okay.
Well done. Okay, our next one says, how long can it take for a horse who has just finished on the track to settle into their new leisure routine?
Oh, I think this is a question for Ali more than me.
How long is a piece of string? That's the trouble. And
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily it's not it doesn't necessarily correlate with how long they've been in racing. One of the easiest horses I've ever had to retrain actually had an extraordinarily successful racing career, won 2 million, traveled all around the world, winning everywhere. And he was, other than having a pretty good buck, he was one of the best and easiest I've ever had to retrain. And now children ride him. I've
Oh,
and he's well, he's. I think that his owner is going to bring him over here for my 3-year-old to have a sit on at some point. But he's
oh,
honestly, he's amazing. And a lot of them are, but and then some that don't actually they've never seen a racetrack. They might have just been in pre-training or just had a
yeah.
little while in training. They might be really tricky to retrain. It take them a long time for them to settle into their new life. So there's not necessarily a correlation there. What I would say though is, first of all, it's going to be you're always going to be limited if your horse is in pain or discomfort. So that's the very first thing to
Mm,
think of, and it will be like peeling the layers off an onion. So you might, you're on your first vet assessment, if there might be something that, is really obvious, and then you treat that, and then you start your retraining, and then you go, oh, actually, there's something else there that needs treating as well, and then you carry on. And I think the most important thing to remember is success or retraining is never linear. It
yeah,
never looks like that.
absolutely.
It looks like a heart rate monitor.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the main thing is not to look at everyone else's success or journeys and compare yourself to them. Equally, if you've had a really easy horse in the past, doesn't necessarily that you'll mean your
Yeah.
next one is, and that doesn't mean that you're failing with your next horse, um, in any shape or form. But the horse will tell you how quickly it is ready to progress to the next stage. I
Yeah,
think go at the horse's
absolutely.
pace is the most important thing, with input from really good equine professionals along the way.
Yeah, really interesting. I was going to say this, there is no, I don't know of any research on this, but I would say anecdotally from in my experience, I think even for horses that are moving from a kind of similar background to a similar background, I think you've got about 6 months minimum before they're
Absolute
really
minimum. Yeah, yeah,
before they're really adapting
yeah.
to their new, and that it could take a lot longer. But I'm thinking that we've got such a huge change from Ex-Racehorses to go to a regular yard, as it were.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. And actually, I've seen my friend Gail Ann is on here tonight. Shout out to Gail Ann. But I've got her horse on the yard at the moment, and he's taken the best part of 3 years
oh,
to really settle into his new job, and he's out winning and doing brilliant things at the moment. But still, to this day, if I look outside and I'm maybe 2 minutes late with his lunch. And so they're in during the day and out at night.
mm,
And I see him lying down all the time in the field. He has a lovely time in the field with all his farmyard friends. Um, but if he's in and I see him out of the window and it's 2 minutes past one or something when I usually feed him, he'll be nodding. That's his way of
oh,
coping with
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
So as much as he's a very happy horse now, and you know he doesn't want for anything, that stereotype behavior is still
yeah,
there, and it's just his way of coping. And
yeah,
whilst it sends, it makes me quite tense looking at it. I think I've got to
yeah,
come down
yeah,
the stairs and go and give him his lunch or turn him out or whatever he wants. I think that's just his way of communicating.
yeah. But brilliant, yeah. And well, he's very lucky that you recognise that, I've got to say.
He is a very lucky boy to be owned by Galan, actually.
Oh,
Okay, so the next one. Mine has become aggressive towards my other horse, who he was attached to, since we introduced two donkeys into the paddock. He is keeping her away from the donkeys, and if I ride her, he has attacked her when she is put back in the field, like he's jealous of me riding her, but he will not go anywhere on his own.
oh. First of all, I want to say, sounds a bit like he's struggling.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's really interesting how many horses really struggle with donkeys being around. Um, so, I mean, all of this behavior has happened since the donkeys. I'm assuming all of this behavior has happened since the donkeys are around. Firstly, can we move the donkeys a bit further away? That would be my initial recommendation. But aggressive behavior very, very often has a physical aspect. You know that there might be an underlying, even very low grade element of pain. So I would also, it would be absolutely remiss of me not to say any aggressive behavior, I would say get a vet. And realistically, if the vet is happy that there isn't any physical problems, I would ask a behaviorist to come in and address this with you. But I think the first thing to do potentially is to see if you can move the donkeys a bit further away, or if we can change where the horses are turned out. See if there's a change in that. But I really hope that you get that sorted.
Mm, absolutely. Um, right. So Vicky has said my horse thankfully doesn't display many of the behaviors mentioned, and I'm realizing how easy and
Oh,
straightforward he is. How lovely. But although not scoped, I believe he has ulcers that I treat with Gastro Premier with great success. But the one behavior that hasn't stopped is when I catch him to take him in most days, his first response is to hold the lead rope. I'm guessing in his mouth.
yeah,
And the best way I can describe it is he's about to windsuck on
suck on
it.
it.
Um, but just pulls it. He tries to get me to pull against him. Can I help him get past this? Or would you say it's like cribbing and windsucking that I should just accept? He only does it when coming in from the field, never hard to catch or reluctant to come in. Interesting.
It is really interesting. And I would say, so these mouthing behaviors, often owners will think that mouthing a lead rope, let's say if your horse is tied up on the yard and they'll mouth the lead rope, or they might, if you're leading them, they might grab your jacket and they might mouth your jacket. These are stress responses. So it's very interesting that this is only happening when he's being asked to come in. And so, first of all, I would think, is there anything that I mean, there could be so many um, factors contributing to this. It may be that he loves his turnout. It may be that he doesn't want to be separated from the other horses. It may be that he's worried about something coming in. It may be that this is a hangover. I know some behaviorists will call it a behavioral scar of something that's happened previously. So that would be quite difficult to get to the bottom of what's going on there. I've had owners that have had similar issues that have actually got their horse something to carry, which has resolved the problem. That the horse, so giving them something to do, okay, so let's say knowing that the horse is actually coming in to have a feed, let's say, or to have something nice happen, so that we know that this isn't a negative experience. One of my clients actually got them, I don't know if you know what I mean, they're almost like a carrot. And their horse just took the carrot in his mouth and very happily came in. And it's very difficult to know if this has always happened, how long this has been going on, and how difficult that might be to undo. So I would assume from what you've said, although it's very difficult to say without seeing it, that this sounds like a stress behavior about having had collar on, having lead rope, and potentially being taken away from friends. So as long as he's physically sound, and again, with everything, I would say think about vet. It might be interesting to just consider, okay, can I give him something to carry? Does that make him more relaxed?
Mm.
Really interesting, though.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. That was a really good answer. So another anonymous person says, fantastic presentation. Thank you. You mentioned that pain is a significant factor for many horses, referencing a figure of 70% for horses. What
Yes.
evidence do you have
Okay.
that pain is a factor for 70% of horses?
Yes, I was actually talking about my behaviour cases, and that might not have been clear. So I'm going to say, I think it was in about 2018 or 2019, I looked at 100 of my cases over a year and went back and looked at I asked for a really complex history when I take on cases, and I think it was about 74% had undiagnosed pain either as the primary cause or a contributing factor. So that figure that I gave was actually just in relation to my cases. So of course we are dealing with a population that we've got behavioral problems. However, I don't know if that was an anonymous person that said that. If you want to drop me an email, there are some really interesting studies now looking at the level of, let's say, musculoskeletal pain in ridden horses, and undiagnosed pain in different situations. So if you want to drop me a line, I can dig out those papers for you and send them to you. I don't think the figures are as high as 75. So that was just in relation to my cases.
That's really interesting. Thank you. So the next one is from another Justine. What are your thoughts on calmers? For example, if they help them stay under the threshold and more regulated, and in turn improve learning.
Oh, that's a really interesting question. if I speak to nutritionists about this, a lot of them will say that a lot of the commercial calmers may be rubbish in a box and a waste of money. And I think the bottom line is if we've got an anxious horse, we need to be thinking about how we can reduce their stress,
Mhm.
or potentially start encouraging relaxation. And rather than thinking about, is there a drug that we can give them that will calm them? We're not necessarily looking at what the underlying cause is. So I think if you're thinking about using calmers, um, it might be an idea to get in touch with a behaviorist and just see if there are any aspects of your horse's life that you might be able to change, that could improve that anxious behavior.
Mm.
That said, I think that there are a couple, there is research that's shown that valerian can be effective, tryptophan can be effective, and oh, there's another particular one which Sue McDonald did some work with, and I can't remember the name of it, which has shown that the horses remembered when they were trained use it, and they'd been given that karma, that they remembered the training long afterwards,
Mm.
long after the control group. And I cannot remember it for the life of me. But again, if somebody wants to message me, let me know, and
Yeah,
I
I'd be
can.
interested to know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Fab, thank you. So the next question says, I'd love to know if you feel there is any differences between mares, geldings, stallions in the way that they react to stress, their thresholds, etc., or is it purely based on the individual and their history?
That is such a good question. And I just think my experience with stallions, unfortunately, is that stallions tend to be kept more than mares and geldings in extremely restricted situations. The stallions that I know that aren't kept in restrictive situations, that are actually kept out with geldings and live a normal life, are probably the calmest horses and the most balanced and good-natured horses that I meet. But I don't know of any research on this actually. That doesn't mean that there isn't any. It just means that I don't know of any. But I would think it would be very difficult to even gauge that because of the way that we keep so many horses, because it could be to do with how they were weaned or when they were weaned, or we do even have some research into behavioral traits in horses, that that there might be some lines that are slightly more aggressive than others. So I think there's going to be so many factors on that. It would be very difficult to judge. My apologies for not giving you a better answer on that.
No, I think you've nailed it with the fact that, and the geldings tend to live more or less restricted lives.
Mm,
I've worked with mares that have had they've been in significant discomfort because of their seasons.
yeah,
So we've gone so far as actually to have ovaries removed before, and that's been the behaviors that they've displayed is very much the aggression and everything has been to do with discomfort and stress, caused
yeah.
by hormonal fluctuations. So, but yeah, I don't think you need to apologize for not. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Okay, so Stella wants to know. Actually, she says, "Hello, Justine. Thanks for a lovely presentation first. I was raised surrounded by racehorses, yet only as a senior after career in music and healthcare, psychological research. Do I own my very own ex-racehorse and his companion, a wild horse welfare rescue 6-year-old, recently castrated pony who is an Appleby Fair well bred, then abandoned rescued pacer. Goodness.
Wow.
Badly injured. I love him so much. That's very sweet.
Oh,
I believe based on I'm guessing that's observation and
observation. Yeah.
trust technique training, that I need to rebit him. As I think he was weaned too early because everything has to go in his mouth, he is more afraid that the 13-year-old thoroughbred and a bit challenging to him. Any advice welcomed?
So are we thinking that Stella is meaning using a different bit? I'm just when
Yeah, possibly. Or would you is there any if you were thinking possibly about the process that you go through to introduce a bit for the first time, would you return to that possibly with a different approach to maybe what happened to him before?
I was thinking actually that if he's been badly injured in his mouth, we'll have probably quite serious trauma and
Yeah.
really, really bad associations with that. I don't think it's the end of the world to consider if we're thinking of, I don't know if we're thinking about riding, but even a bitless bridle. And actually, I think in so many situations, there are some horses that have had such bad experiences with bits that but they're much safer actually with a bitless bridle. So that wouldn't be the end of the world for me at all. I would consider that if that's all right with, was it Stella?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but in relation to rebitting, if you really do want to rebit him, I would think of something that's very different than previously. I would absolutely make sure that you've had a very thorough dental check that there isn't anything in his mouth that is a concern about that,
Mhm.
um, and introduce the bit very, very gradually. You
Yeah.
can do things like smear honey on it or molasses on it and just introduce it to them. Let them lick it and potentially hold it before you consider asking them to have it in. But I think it would be really, really important to consider body language here, signs of stress, and if there is any sign of concern, if a bit goes in, then I would rethink using a bit at all.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. So then the next person says, "Hello, I have an ROR, so retrained racehorse,
Mm.
3 and a bit years out of racing and retraining with me. He has a habit of sticking his tongue out to the side. Teeth are together. He isn't chomping on the bit or unsettled in his mouth or in the contact. Um,
Just loose.
Loose and flopping out the gap between just the lower than where the bit sits. Right. Okay. So out the side. He will do this tied up on the yard leading, even just stood in the field, as well as when ridden.
And for this, I almost want to say exactly the same as the previous question, because I just think this, I mean, this sounds like it's learned from a previous experience. But when they do this and they're sticking their tongues out the side, or if we're seeing tongue lolling, or you might see lip flapping, or um, some of them will actually roll their tongues right up inside their mouth. Um, I think they're saying as clearly as they can that they're struggling with the bit being in, and it's more comfortable for them if it's out. Um, I wouldn't say that's ideal. So I would be thinking about either a bitless bridle, or again, how could we reintroduce that very, very in a much more positive way? And it might be an idea to get a behaviourist to have a look at that. And also, let's just check for pain.
So she said even when he's just stood in the field as well.
Oh, okay. So this is not anything to do with the bit.
So it could be, yeah, it doesn't sound like it if it is when he stood in the field
Oh,
as well as when ridden.
okay. Well, if I would ask a dentist first of
Mm,
all, and get the dentist's opinion on this. It might be learned. I mean, the tongue might have been damaged previously. It's really difficult to know without looking at that, but I think you need a really good dentist to have a look at that,
yeah.
and work out what's happening there. Sorry, I missed that, Ali.
Oh no, don't worry. No worries. Um,
Mm.
the next one we might need just a little bit more clarity on before we answer it fully. I don't know if you can see it as well, Justine. It says,
Yeah.
my question, Justine, is do you think this is a stable vice he's picked up from his time in racing? And this is an anonymous person, so
Hmm.
I'm not entirely sure what that might have been in reference to, or whether it was in reference to the last question.
Oh, about the tongue.
Yeah, about the tongue. Um, he was box rested. Is it a stable vice that he's picked up from his time in racing, and is it something that I can help him with? He was box rested for a year from injury before I bought him. It isn't something that phases me. I just get very much marked down in dressage because of this. I'm thinking it's because of the tongue.
That it might be the
Yeah,
tongue
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. And yes, you're going to get marked down in dressage with anything oral now. Uh, because we know that this is going to be a sign that there's potentially either current discomfort or previous discomfort. I would say very difficult to retrain these. And I think that these sort of behaviors happen from pretty serious trauma previously from the bit.
Mm,
I'm so sorry that that this is affecting him. But again, the only thing I can suggest really is first of all go and have a dentist have a really really good look. And I'm just wondering if tongue might have been damaged.
yeah.
You could try re training it, retraining a bit, or see what happens in a bitless bridle. But if this is the horse that is doing this in the field, I think that this is something that you would be very unlikely you'd be able to retrain.
Mm. It sounds like the tongue's got some kind of damage somewhere.
Yeah,
And yeah, to it. And yeah, I think dentist is definitely the a really good
yeah.
shout. Thank you. Let's just move on to the next one. Got to rattle through these. I just realized for the
I
time
know.
I'm having a ball. So,
I know.
um, so Claire has said, my horse finds it difficult in new environments. For example, taking him showing recently. He'll stand fine when I'm doing an individual show. He becomes quite nappy.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if you can make this process any easier or if you can do some practice away from a kind of show environment. And so for something like that, could you, if he's good and he's doing an individual show, as it were, I want to say in inverted commas, well at home in your arena, could you take him to just a very, very short journey, hire a local arena or even a field, potentially go with a friend and see if you can do the show in that, your individual show in that environment, and kind of build up. I'm thinking about trigger stacking here. So it may be that the whole show environment is completely overwhelming for him. So can we build up to that and how can we change the training? And again, it could be that an instructor or a behaviorist might be able to help you with that. But I would just be thinking, can we make that easier for him? We need to, it sounds like he's struggling in that environment, so we need to make that process more positive. It's going to be very difficult to do that in that environment without building it up gradually and taking smaller steps.
Just a little plug for ROR education here as well.
Yeah.
We do a series called Step Into Competition. We have Step Into showing clinics
Oh,
dotted around the
brilliant.
country, which is
Yeah.
exactly what this kind of thing is. They're to deal with these kind of issues. They are phasing down for the summer now because everybody is out practicing or they've done their practice and they're out at their shows. But they'll be starting up again in September and October. So keep an eye out for those. They are absolutely invaluable because you get access to a judge who's often a coach as well, and really understands the way of going, but also they understand how best to introduce these horses to a show environment, basically. And you get countless tips. All the feedback we've had from these was absolutely excellent. So take advantage. But even if you can't get to a step into showing, we have club events on that you could absolutely replicate this. So if you're in a group of three, you could get the other two people to stand in the middle, and you do a little ride around, do your individual show while they watch, and just get your horse used to that kind of environment. But as
Yeah.
Justine says, I think it's so important to pay attention to all of the other little things um, that might be stresses for him in the lead up to that situation.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, that's amazing. I want to do all your courses now.
You're very welcome.
I will come. Seriously, I'm coming. Oh,
So Sam has said, we've owned our ex-racer for a couple of months. At first, when he was turned out, he was fine. Then he started lunging at us and turning his bum when we tried to catch him. He's much happier when he hasn't been turned out. He sometimes lunges and bites in the stable or when people approach his stable door. What can we do to help him?
okay. So first thing, again, because we've got aggression, I am going to say absolutely make sure that you've got a vet check him over. Even things like mild arthritis can increase the risk of a horse becoming aggressive. Um, I had a car accident about 15 years ago. I have an intermittently um, twingy back. And when it's bad, and it's not particularly awful, I am so grumpy and I'm much more likely to react. And, our horses are going to be exactly the same. But with any aggression problem, I would say the first thing, really, really ask your vet. Tell your vet about the problem, that you're seeing aggressive behavior, and ask them to assess the horse. But here we go. So when he was first turned out, he was fine. Then he started lunging at us and turning his bum when we tried to catch him. So we've either got that he doesn't want to come in because he doesn't want to leave the other horses, or because he likes being turned out, or he's worried about what's happening when he comes in. So if I'm looking at catching situations, I would do something like, I don't necessarily want to recommend going into a field with a feed bowl if there are lots of other horses there, but you want to start retraining the catching with positive experiences. And that could be, if you can get, if he's somewhere near a fence line, can you chuck a carrot over so that he starts associating you approaching him with something nice? And then work up to that he comes to the gate. He has a feed outside the gate and then he goes back in again. So we're starting changing that the process of catching. You arriving is starting to predict something really nice.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by he's much happier when he hasn't been turned out. I would like to know more about that, because that might just be that he is just used to being in, and because he's had that as a history, that his behavior is, I want to say, more consistent in that environment. But then we have him sometimes lunging and biting in the stable or when people approach his stable door. And again, so I'd need lots more information about the context there. Is it when food is present? Is it particular people? Is it to do with trigger stacking? We want to know the function of those behaviors. And realistically, with aggression, the best I can offer is say, I would get a decent behaviorist to come out and help.
Mm, absolutely. Thank you. Joe has said my horse is very reactive to tannoy systems and a bell sound and bell sounds at shows. His behavior has been borderline dangerous. How do I manage this?
Okay, so what's interesting here is you can actually use systematic desensitization, which is a gradual exposure to a feared stimuli. So here we've got the sound of the tannoy and the bell, and counter conditioning, which is giving the horse something that they like to change their emotional reaction to that feared stimuli. Using the two of those together is really, really efficient at dealing with these kind of problems, but you have to manage it. So there are lots and lots of really interesting ways to do this, and a lot of them are courtesy of the dog training world. So you can online on YouTube, and on our phone, there are lots of apps for things like sounds of the bell or clippers, or I'm just trying to think what else, traffic, things like that. And what you want to do is when your horse is relaxed in a nice environment, you want to start playing the sound very quietly and pairing it with something that they like. So, like at feed time, and you gradually get the sound louder and louder and louder. However, At no point during that training process can you take them back into that extremely loud sound because they'll relapse. So you have to build it up gradually. And realistically, again, a good behaviorist is probably going to be the best, you're the best to help you with this. But I just want to say that is something that could be addressed.
Did you just want to touch on the idea of flooding on this
Yes,
well?
absolutely. Okay, so flooding is when a horse is kept in um, close proximity to a feared stimuli with what they perceive to be no means of escape. And so if if your horse is in these show situations and he's extremely worried about this, and he feels like he can't escape, flooding can not only increase the severity of the problem, but can lead to all sorts of problems with the horse generalizing to other things. So you might end up with him becoming fearful of other situations in the show environment. So I would absolutely say if he's very reactive about these, I would not put him in those situations. And if you can find shows where they haven't got tannoy systems, and well, I mean, avoid finding a show without a bell. You might get it at a pony club, I suppose. I don't know. It'd be difficult to manage, but I would look at retraining that before putting him back into that situation. And well done, Ali, for pulling me up on that.
It's just because, so the
Yeah,
reason I
absolutely.
asked about this is because about flooding specifically is I unfortunately worked on a yard where we had a lot of ex-race horses, and one of the methods that they used to get horses used to tannoys and bells and all of the noise that goes along with shows is they used to play it very loudly into their stables.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one surefire way to stress out a horse,
Yeah,
is to
yeah.
confine it in a stable and play. So, yeah, we wouldn't advise going down that route.
No, absolutely. And
But
this has got
yeah,
to be managed so carefully.
yeah, and
Yeah,
again, this is again at a lot of our events. We can so I we held one here not that long ago, and we had one horse that really didn't like the noise around the at shows, so various noises around the show. And the coach who was here played loud music from her car, but gradually turned it up as the day went on, or as the training session went on.
wow.
So the just little things like that that
Yeah,
can help
yeah,
in a really safe environment where the horse knows that actually, it's not suddenly introduced. It's turned
yes,
up quite, just
yeah,
gently throughout the training session.
yeah, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So, someone's asked, how common is it for ex-racers to have steroid injections in their joints?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't, that's completely out my comfort zone. I'm sure Ali's going to do a better job of answering that.
I can take that one. So fairly common. I mean, I mean, it's a topic of it's a very hot topic at the moment. Marrying up kind of performance with welfare, and a lot of the time it's whether the means justifies, so the end justifies the means. Is the horse's welfare going to be compromised by having steroid injections? Certainly to perform whilst it's in racing. I'd say it's fairly common to have steroid injections and other things as well. So there are lots of other ways of treating osteoarthritis within horses. And it's evolving constantly. And I just have to say here that a lot of the research that goes into providing horses with um, these treatments to treat or to help them be more comfortable through their joints and things is paid for. All of that research, or a lot of that research, is paid for by racing. So one of my little horses has alpha treatment, which is terribly fancy, and he doesn't have steroids, but he has alpha treatment every now and again just to keep him really comfortable. that all that research was paid for by racing. So it and so whilst it's very common for horses that are in racing to have steroid injections and other treatments, they are available beyond racing because of racing having paid for it. Is that ideal if horses are being medicated kind of more than twice a year? Absolutely not. I don't think. I think we can all
Mm.
categorically agree on that. But welfare always has to be married up with that. But the best thing that I can do, the best thing I can say is if you suspect that your horse has had steroid injections whilst it's been in racing previously, just ask the previous trainer or ask the retrainer whether, that maybe the horse came through. Has the horse, can I see the medical history? Sometimes they say no, but the majority of the time, I've never once yet had a trainer say no to me when I've asked for the medical history. Um, and then deal with it with your vet. Get some X-rays. Like Justine's been saying, just make sure that you have a really good vet on board that you can have a chat with about the horse's welfare, married up with his comfort, and whether you need to carry on having any medication to any of the joints.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, right. Next one. Lindsay has said, I've recently started riding an ex-racehorse and realised that the contact is non-existent. What do I do when he starts jogging it while on a hack? I try as light a contact as possible, but he hollows and giraffe necks. I'm moving him to a livery yard with an eventer who is used to RORs, but not for a few weeks. I'm getting used to enjoying the
The
forwardness.
forwardness. Oh, um, well, I was just going to say, I mean, you may end up at your new yard with some great advice there. If we've got somebody that's experienced with retraining racehorses, but I would say just don't try training it while you're out on a hack. I would just be practicing in the arena. And I've got a feeling that Ali is going to give a much better answer than I am on this. She will be more used to this.
So this is something that we do talk about quite a lot, again, on some of our other webinars. So actually, we've got a hacking webinar coming up next month where we'll tackle this as well.
Brilliant.
So in terms of the light contacts, these horses have never had to travel into a contact the same as they would do having in the leisure world or a sport horse world. So and I would say absolutely the first thing you need to make sure that the horse is not avoiding the contact because of a pain issue or a discomfort issue. So veterinary advice should be sought whenever a horse is avoiding taking the contact. I would look at the bit that you've got in his mouth as well to see whether there's something that can encourage him to go forward to the contact a little bit more. However, good contact is built on the ground, in my
Yeah.
opinion, not from on board. So before I even get on a horse, I want to know that I can do a little bit of in-hand work, and the horse take the contact and come a bit round to the contact. Be able to lift it, or not necessarily lift his back, but move his back a little bit, so you know that you're feeling the hind leg in the contact, not the underside of the neck in the contact. Long lining is brilliant for teaching
Yeah,
to go
absolutely.
out to the rein. So my advice would 100% be start from the ground when you're building a contact. Don't try and build a contact when you're riding.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant advice. Yeah.
Right, answer line, that's done. Oh, this is
The
one that I think,
teeth. Yeah,
yes.
teeth, 6 monthly, physio, etc. Checks and all, it's all clear. When he's jumping, he does tuck the tongue back in. It's probably out 40% ridden time, then tucks back in. What's really interesting then is just that he does this intermittently. So I'm wondering if it's about stress in different situations. Um, I think realistically, without seeing this, it's very, very difficult for us to be able to advise. So I would say get a decent behaviourist out to have a look at it is probably your best bet. But
Mm,
I would also really consider a bitless bridle.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Maria's previous question, can you remember which one that was?
No, I can't. So he'll also plant in hand and ridden.
Oh,
Um,
is it the aggressive one with the donkeys, I think, possibly.
oh, okay.
So, yeah. So he will also plant in hand and ridden, will not move forward in any direction. How can I positively reinforce moving forward with me?
Okay, so I mean, not wanting to go forward again, this is ringing alarm bells about that there might be something physical going on. So that would be my first recommendation. Um, Thinking about positive reinforcement, I would absolutely say definitely look into this, but I think you're going to need a trainer to come out and help you with that. I think us potentially giving you advice to do that might be quite confusing, and there's probably quite a lot that could be um, what's the word? Um, Somebody's going to need to see what's happening, I think. So if you're new to positive reinforcement, I would say see if you can find a good positive reinforcement trainer at somewhere near you. But I mean, even things like targeting, getting them to go forward to a target on the ground, you can be really successful with those. That's the way forward, I think. So yeah, absolutely. Um, the trailer loading issue. Brilliant, brilliant point. Of course, they can also view them as getting into the stalls. This is going into a confined space. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Brilliant reminder. Yeah.
absolutely. The next one, Emma Walsh. I rehomed a 2-year-old ex-racehorse last November after only 5 starts. Since then, he's been gelded, turned away to mature, and is handled daily. I'm fortunate that both his breeder and trainer appear to have done some preparation for life after racing. Amazing,
Mm.
including tying up and groundwork. My main question is around socialization and confidence building. He's turned out 24/7 with my retired broodmare, who is dominant, but also very tolerant. As he's matured, he's become more playful and confident, sometimes biting or pestering her, although they have plenty of space and neither seems stressed. At what point should we intervene and give the older horse a break? And how much should we allow the youngsters to learn social skills naturally from an experienced companion? Also, he's extremely sensitive to fly spray and appears never to have been introduced to it. I'm using a gradual approach with rewards, allowing him to investigate the bottle and applying small amounts by hand. Is this the right approach or any advice?
First of all, on the fly spray, that sounds fantastic. Yes, gradual approach. So if it's a spray bottle, I would spray it a distance away from him, feed him at the same time, and just very gradually get closer and closer. But letting him investigate it, that's brilliant. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, really interesting question in relation to a youngster being with an older horse. This is really tough. This is really tough. Horses are very expensive to keep. We can't just keep buying loads of them. And so unless you're on a yard which has got a lot of different types of horses, it can be really hard to try and find suitable companions. And I was going to say on paper, if you've got a horse that hasn't been very well socialized, the ideal companion to turn them out with is an older horse that's well socialized, has got good um, signaling, as it were, and is very well socialized. So that's fantastic. However, he's still very young and he's probably going to harass her. And mares don't pay as much as geldings. So I do think it is really important for them to have um, company their own age that they can play with and that will harass and not harass her. But I do understand how difficult this is if you haven't got access to that. I was going to say, do you have any friends that have got a youngster that you might be able to borrow for a period of time, or that they might be able to move to live together? Um, but I do think, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Youngsters need to learn social skills from an experienced companion. But then the ideal again is that they have peers their own age.
Mm.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. It's really not. And then obviously if you then go to young stock livery, then you have less control and
Yeah, yeah. Good luck.
yes. Yeah. So Jill has asked what's the best tip to help with schooling and gaining an outline with ex-racers. So that
I'm
is
going to leave that to you.
yeah, that's very much what I said earlier. And
Mm,
any outline is built without a rider on board. So they don't have, so effectively, if you think the outline, it's not just the beautiful neck and head position, it is the engagement of the whole body, being able to feel the hind leg in the contact, pushing through. This is something I could talk about for ages. It's like a specialist subject for me. But I won't because I know that we've been here a very long time. So I would say get a really good person who knows how to work horses from the ground. Make sure that first of all the horse is comfortable throughout its body, so maybe a vet check, physio check, that kind of thing. And then teach the horse how to balance itself from the ground, not with a rider on board, because it's all to do with balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Emma's asked, can you explain more why horses don't like donkeys?
I think some do. I think some struggle with them. There used to be, I've forgotten what they're called. Is it the Poitou donkeys that were local to me? And if some of our horses saw them, they had eyes on stalks and, became 17 too. I would imagine it will just be that if they've never met a donkey before, they look a bit similar and a bit strange. So more often than not, I would say can horses and donkeys can make reasonable companions, but they are very different species. Ideally, we want to really be keeping them. We want to keep donkeys with donkeys so that they've got a good social life, and we want to keep horses with horses. Um, I think that's probably the best I can offer. The best I can offer there.
Thank you. Rebecca has said, similar to a previous question, my horse sucks his tongue a bit like wind sucking, especially after having his hard feed. We had one that did this with treats, actually. He
Mm.
also loves to lick my hand and seems to relax doing this. Is it okay to let him lick my hand?
I think it's okay to let him lick your hand as long as you're happy to do that. I've had horses do this after being given extra strong mints. That's, I
Yes.
think, and I was going to say sucks his tongue a bit like wind sucking. The only thing I'm thinking is that I know that some of them, if they've had, I want to say a hard feed, that some behaviorists have thought that this might be so wind sucking or going and licking something afterwards might be, but there's no evidence for a sign of like gastro upset, that it's just a little bit uncomfortable. And so that might make it feel a bit more comfortable afterwards. There is no evidence for that. But I think if that's all he's doing and he wants to lick your hand afterwards, I'd be fine with that. I think that's up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Last one. Vicky says, thank you. I'll try the carrot when
Oh, okay.
testing. I have many other questions that I'd love to ask about subtle behaviors displayed, but I won't keep you all night. It's
Yeah.
interesting what you say about mouthing issues as he likes to poke his tongue out halfway sometimes, which looks very cute, but I see it as a stress action. I've watched a video of him as a yearling at Tattersalls sales and
Oh.
noticed him doing the same thing then. He's now 8.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Vicky. I was just going to say, not, I don't know if it's particularly relevant for your horse, but there's been a lot of research on um, kind of abnormal oral behaviors in farm animals, and certainly in pigs that have been weaned very early, they do a lot of strange oral behaviors. And there is there are questions about whether it might be that they would ordinarily, of course, have been sucking out on a teat and they don't have the option to do that, so that they will go and develop these kind of abnormal oral behaviors. So I think if he was doing it that early, it may well be a kind of hangover. It could be a hangover to a traumatic weaning or a difficult weaning. It's very different. I mean, that's not going to make any difference to how you approach it. But these are all, I mean, I could talk about this all night as well. It's really interesting. But I think anything that we're going to see tension in the mouth or the nose area, or we're going to see tongue sticking out, I would say is likely to be a stress behavior. But really good luck with that.
Yeah, Absolutely. Interestingly enough, we do actually have a little warm blood on the yard who was orphaned when he was 3 days old, and he does something similar. And I've always
Oh,
thought it's because of, yeah, because of being orphaned so young.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he didn't have a foster mare, so
Oh,
um,
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting.
Sue has made a very good point that Lou Robson, who is Thoroughbred Dressage, she does our webinars for us monthly. So we call them Navigating Ex-Racehorse Life. And she is also very good at explaining the contact for anybody who
Brilliant.
is interested. And she does, like I said earlier, she does spend a lot of time talking about the balance and and how to create a contact on a horse that maybe is reluctant to take the contact forward. So yes, we do free webinars with her every month, and she is absolutely brilliant at talking about the retraining side of all of this.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that's it. Amazing.
Brilliant questions, though.
Yeah,
Absolutely brilliant questions. And
yeah.
I just wanted to say my apologies that a lot of that is vague. It's almost impossible to advise without seeing the horse and taking a history, as I'm sure, Ali's going to say as well. Really, really difficult to comment on individual things, but I hope that was useful.
That's honestly, that was incredible. I think it's really even if you know a lot of the stuff, it's really good just to see it all, all in front of you. So I honestly, Justine, I can't thank you enough.
You're honestly so
I
welcome. I've really
find
enjoyed
it
it.
I just find it absolutely fascinating. And like I said, I could talk about this all night, but we won't do
Well,
anything.
we will do another time. Oh,
So thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you everyone who joined us.
Yeah,
That
thank
was a
you.
long
Brilliant
one,
questions.
but we've still got loads of people with us, so we obviously haven't
Yeah,
got everybody.
yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
so
much.
much. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye bye.